Good morning. We'll go ahead and call the meeting for April 9th to order. If we can start with a roll call, please, Charity.
Director Freeman is not here. Director Costello, Ward Costello. Director Bain, who is not going to be here this meeting. Director Patrick.
Present.
Chairman Metz. And Chairman Booth.
Here.
So we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Charity. As Charity did allude, we do have a new director that will be joining us starting for the May meeting. Jimmy Bain was appointed 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, from City Council.
Show him.
And he had a conflict from today's meeting that was already on his schedule at the time of the appointment, but he is scheduled to join us for the May meeting.
But he has a very successful collection business, runs collections and for different entities and very good at it, been good at it for a long time.
And after about 30 years when I met
very
him.
successful businessman.
Look forward to him joining our team. First item of business is the consent agenda, which includes approval of the minutes from March 5. Any comment on that? If not, looking for a motion for approval. Motion, is there a second for that?
Second.
Call that for a vote, please, Charity.
Agenda. Director Ward Costello. Patrick.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Metz.
Aye.
And Chairman Booth.
Aye. Thank you. Next item of action is public comment. Seeing none this morning, I think that we can move to the election of the officers. With that, first order of business is the role of secretary, which currently is held by Charity. Looking for a motion to continue that, unless there's a...
So moved.
Have a motion for Charity. Have a second.
That's why, hurry up.
Anyone want to step up?
Let me throw her under the bus.
Okay, so.
All those in favor, we do it by voice. Any? All in favor? Okay, none opposed. So, and then that's the time where we get to turn the floor over to Charity to let her run the elections for the balance of the EDA.
Okay, if you'll notice, there was a sheet at the top of your agenda package that states that current slate of officers has been the chairman is Donald Booth, the vice chairman Alan Metz, and the treasurer was Tim Trant. Someone could elect to make a motion to continue that unless somebody wants to stand up and offer to be an officer or suggest.
Off that slate and Toto if you so choose.
So Angela makes a motion. And somebody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Ward Costello? Director Trant?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Metz?
Aye.
And Chairman Booth?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll keep the current slate of officers.
Thank you. We've got one item of new business, and that's related to the Eastern Virginia Regional Industrial Facility Authority. Don't ask me to say that fast 5 times.
Acronyms no better.
I was going to say.
Having a,
Riffa.
Dave, would you like to kind of report?
I would be happy to, Mr. Chairman. Certainly would look to Treasurer Trant, who is actually a member of the EV RIFA, to add some comments if he will.
Alternate member.
That is correct, sir. Very good. I would be pleased to let you know that the inaugural initial meeting of the Eastern Virginia RIFA was conducted on Friday, March the 15th. The meeting was attended by the member localities on the peninsula. The representatives were there. The Virginia Peninsula Chamber of Commerce hosted the meeting. It was excellent in form. It was expeditious. They accomplished what was needed at that meeting. They adopted their bylaws. They elected officers. They set a path forward to work with the CAOs to develop projects, a project review, and it appears that the CAOs will be bringing, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, please, that will be the group that will bring projects forward, evaluate, and bring those forward for RIFA discussion and consideration, and then set the next meeting for, I believe, Tim, is it May 7th? I think
that's right.
I think that's right. And beyond that, Poquoson is excited to be part of this this organization and watch it move forward with great enthusiasm and be a key participant. So certainly I would look for Director Tran to add anything he would.
No, I guess the only thing I would add is be interesting. I mean, it's a great step forward. Effort is primarily peninsula-oriented localities, but and I guess Gloucester is a member, but I think Isle of Wight potentially and some of the south side localities expressed an interest in joining, and I think there's some debate among them whether that makes sense or not. I think everybody's in favor of furthering regionalism. It's just a question of does it become unwieldy, large, and where the rubber will meet the road, in my view, and it's yet to be seen in terms of its value, to Poquoson and to the other localities is the revenue sharing, and each locality, when these projects come up, York County, I think, first concept for a project was pretty generous in bringing that as a seed project in RIF. But each locality in promoting a project for the communal good is going to have to make a concession on revenue they get from that project, and what is the offsetting benefit. And presumably it's cost sharing, for infrastructure improvements and public finance of economic development, often infrastructure, seed money to support a project that would produce revenue that would be split, tax revenues that would be split among the participating localities, and just be interesting to see if there's if in practice that can work. The economic incentives are there to encourage that effort. It's just hard for me to imagine what those are. And I mean, I think certainly they exist. It's just interesting to see how they materialize. So for Poquoson, I guess, it will mean, if we have projects or opportunities, land, but we don't have necessarily the budget to do it. I mean, we're kind of land strapped, so I don't know how much of that but if we had opportunities in land, but not, cash to fund infrastructure, we could potentially partner with other localities and say, hey, look, if we share in the cost of the infrastructure to attract this project, we would share, ratably relative to that contribution in the tax revenues that are generated from it. So that's the concept which it will work. And the interesting thing about it, the last thing I'll say is, it's not mandatory participation in every project. So you may have 10 projects that come forward over a 2-year span, and maybe the board decides to do 5 of them. And of those 5, not every locality will participate in each project. All localities may participate in each project, but it may just be 2 in this one, a different 3 in this one. So a lot of flexibility for how the projects move forward. great tool, just see if in practice it has value.
You recall who was elected as the officers for this?
I don't recall from below the chair, but Mark Carter, who's the former Assistant County Administrator, long-serving Director of Planning, Fort County.
Right.
Who I've worked with a lot over my career and just think very highly of generally as a human being and as a, professional. He was unanimously endorsed as chair. I think he's retired now.
Right.
We're, I think, lucky for that.
Questions or comments? Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Tim, for volunteering your time to be an alternate part of that as well. So unfinished business, we do need to kind of have a further consideration of the HREDA FY20 funding request. If you recall last meeting, Steve Herbert was here to kind of lay out the vision and some of the things that have been occurring from HREDA. Obviously, in our initial request to, from budget request to City Council, we included the funding with our initial budget request, and we need to kind of take some formal action as to whether we want to kind of continue in our participation of HREDA such that kind of final budgets can be locked in alignment with what we did last year. Obviously, the funding wouldn't be available till July 1 with the start of the new fiscal year, so Council's looking for a little bit of feedback from us based on kind of our sense of that. So I'll use that to lay the groundwork and kind of open it up for discussion or dialogue or questions, and looking to kind of take an action here today.
What is our financial obligation again?
11, got it right here.
It says 11,451,
11 or 12,000.
but it might be a bit higher because of the per capita. It's $1 per capita, so probably a little over 12,000. I think.
5 roughly.
Okay.
I mean, I think they certainly laid out where they are and where their focus is over the coming 24 months. They're trying to put in place a funding mechanism, for lack of a better term, that gets it beyond a year-to-year commitment. And we kind of expressed, well, that's kind of hard since our budgets are done on an annual basis. We funds that we don't have access to at this point. And they kind of understand that, but they're encouraging localities to try to look forward funding availability to say, this is an organization that we think has some merit in the economic development interest of the region, and therefore allow them to secure a longer stream economic forecast ahead of them. Now, the thing, I guess, that was interesting, that my takeaway of it is that they're really committed on trying to bring in the private dollars into the organization, which I think they've always had that as a tenet, but I haven't heard it as a focus, was my takeaway. Right or wrong, but that was kind of my takeaway. And so I think that's got some merit, looking for the private corporate partners to bring them to the table in an equal amount of funding investment in the organization. Have any other summaries there that we can maybe afford?
I thought Director Trance comments, among others, and basically a request for any sort of reasonable ROI that we could see was certainly a good point, because the EDA wants to be a very good steward of the taxpayers' dollar. What I thought, in addition to that, or maybe in a variation of that, if the authority considers membership, Charity and I will make sure that quarterly, at the chairman and at the authority's discretion, we will come back with an update on where we are with HREDA and what tangible benefits that we can put before you that we've seen in the previous 90 days. We'll do that every quarter. I can tell you that I've in the past thought it might not be a great fit just because we're a smaller locality and the projects that are brought for consideration for us, we don't have 200 acres for a mega site, nor is that something I think the community would want if we did. But they do provide and have recently provided very valuable next level research data that has been helpful for us, and they've pledged to continue to do that. They've also pledged to look to find smaller projects that they can provide for everyone's consideration, to take a shot at. And we'd like to get a site visit. We almost had one, and that was not their fault that we didn't. We didn't match up with the particular business that was interested. Additionally, it's come to my attention in the past couple of weeks that HREDA will very likely be working with HRPDC and also with RIFA in identifying not just identifying the mega sites in the region, but making recommendations for those mega sites and what would need to be done to bring those up to be pad ready and very saleable. And my understanding is that's going to be a key element, key initiative moving forward for the entire region. And I say those things, I guess, as just for thinking points. It may be good to consider another year with HREDA, not least of which they've established an MOU, which lays out what they're going to do. And quite frankly, even though they request a multi-year commitment, as the chairman's already referenced, it's all subject to appropriation. And if indeed the EDA recommended and if council endorsed it, if after a year it was not of benefit to Poquoson, certainly I would anticipate the city considering not continuing in the organization. So those would be the comments I have, I think.
Additional understanding that I have is through HREDA's Poquoson's involvement with HREDA, the city manager does participate in some of the city and county administrator level meetings and kind of is involved at a regional table that that does afford him. Without that participation is you understand that there's a non-tangible, non-dollar return through that regional participation, that dialogues at that level that us sitting at the table, but I believe it does allow the city in some conversations that they would not otherwise.
I still keep going back to the same thing. We have basically one small site. Organization's great. Other municipalities is a no-brainer, but just can't connect the dots to where they've never lost anything, and I can't connect. If they did, it's probably not something we'd even, it might be something industrial. I just can't see it. However, the part about, was it, you said city manager?
City manager level.
Is that of value to him? I mean, but is that something that really is a box he wants to check? Because that's a whole different benefit that I have no clue about. But I just don't see how they're ever going to bring us anything. We just don't have the site.
none of them feel to me like they're a perfect fit for our area. Lifestyle that we're used to, if it happened to land across, would be full. But for me, I do understand the need for data. Dave, you mentioned last time that if I understood you correctly, that access to data was important to you. Working in the data industry, I know that a little bit of data is very expensive.
Well, it is.
And so, in my heart, that's the only place where I feel like, hey, it's a thumb, is that the amount of data that you have access to for our.
Good point.
But in terms of seeing them as the I don't know, I guess it's Easter, the Messiah of bringing things in. I don't see that happening, but I do see it's important. I see that the networking is important. But I do think if I could put a caveat on the bottom of it is, we need to see some effort in this direction, considering us more than just a check. And I don't know what that looks like. You guys decide what that looks like, even if it's an introduction charity that you find valuable or a networking to, even just offsetting some of the unmanned system stuff that I know offsetting. All of those things, I think, have value to our community because they have very small footprints. And if they can make those networking connections or something so that at the end, no introduction or nothing that you felt exciting in some capacity, that
A lot of data available, and I don't know if they have some sort of. Is there something?
Well, I can tell you it was very pertinent for one of the, we didn't land the prospect, but we got a very substantial callback from the prospect, the real estate company representing the prospect, based on the next level data. Much like Buxton, you go with a company like Buxton, obviously you don't just get demographic information, you get buying habits and what each household is doing. We don't have that detailed of data, but what HREDA has provided us was closer to that than anything we've seen, and it was very useful and instructive for us to be able to provide that to this particular prospect. In fact, it was so compelling, and it contained some retail leakage opportunities and things of that nature, and some other things that we didn't have. That particular project, just as a side note, the reason that there wasn't more interest was based on traffic counts. The demographics, they were doing cartwheels over, as they should. But that data and the fact that we were able to convey it got us in the door for a conversation that we would not have been able to have. So we're hopeful that we can build on that and continue to utilize not only that data, but we're going to, if the city ultimately continues to have a membership, we're going to be very insistent and frequent in our contacts with HREDA to continue to provide that. And I think they already understand it's a great value to us, much more so than a mega site opportunity, which we don't have and really don't want, I think. So.
One thing he said in the meeting was he outlined the 4 or 5 key components that they talked about, and lifestyle was one of the key components. They was probably the only place that Poquoson fit into. What was the presentation he made was that Poquoson did come into play with, one of the sales points is Poquoson's lifestyle is a attraction, even for somebody who's coming to Hampton, and you can use whatever that's worth. He did emphasize that, maybe
Very good
because
point.
it's the only point he had to emphasize.
Yeah, we did talk about another intangible or indirect benefit was that some of the work they do brings, net worth individuals and high-paying jobs. Then potentially those executives or compensated individuals would choose to live in Poquoson and support, support our housing values and real estate.
That
Indirect
happen
benefit.
organically anyway? I mean, without, the executive doesn't need HR, DA telling them what house to buy.
No, I agree with you. If we did not participate in prospect, as I suspect they would, to Hampton or Newport, housing stock standpoint, probably. I guess the difference potentially be featured in some of their literature. We do have a pretty snazzy page in there, regional promote. On lifestyle, which is what we have to sell.
That's
so
right.
That might, the water sort of oriented lifestyle here. So that would be the counterpoint.
Yep.
But I agree that it's not a complete trade-off.
Just one other concept, thinking sort of outside the box here. But if that $12,000 just went to you guys to use directly for your mission without it just going into this sea of whoever these guys are and whatever they do, what if you had the $12,500?
Well, and that's a good question, and that's one that Tim had referenced previously. And we took, Charity and I both took a hard look at what we could do with the 12,000, increased advertising, maybe an additional mission trip that we haven't been able to go on. But there was nothing that, in my mind, and I'll let Charity speak to that for herself, but I did not see anything that was going to be a complete game changer for us with that $12,000. And as Angela referenced, 12,000 can get eaten up pretty quick in data and that sort of thing, and collection and procurement. I don't think that would move the needle. If I thought it would, then I would say, hey, please let us utilize the 12,000 through the EDA. I don't know that would be. We're already marketing to all the commercial developers in the area the properties that are available. We're constantly reaching out and making contacts. I think one of the points that you made, Alan, and I may be quoting you incorrectly at a previous meeting, was, if that particular property, if somebody wanted to be there, they would know about it already, and they would be there. And that property is going to be very, very valuable. It just needs the right fit. And I think for us, when you see the Legacy, which is coming on board, and they've submitted their site plans and that sort of thing, I believe, and I would defer to others, but I believe that property will only become more desirable and more valuable. And the data that we need to make the best decisions on pursuing businesses that complement the community, it will never be more valuable than during that time. So as those properties become more valuable, as the Lockowitz property, of course, in the same vicinity becomes more valuable, the more information we have to put our best foot forward with and on behalf of the EDA is a good thing. So that's what
Another thought along those lines, and I know there's some practicalities, with the council's budget that $12,000, in a given year probably our efforts or your staff's efforts, but that accrued over time, if that commitment remained at the disposal of the EDA, time, reasonable war chest to maybe to do some opportunistic things. So, 4 years is, 48 grand. I mean, that grand that, we might use, and we've used funds in some, in ways to incentivize different businesses happen here. And so, anyway, just, I don't know that council would be in a position to continue that funding commitment for sort of a capital. I think if we weren't, we ought to request that. We're not going to do the HREDA support. We ought to request that the funding be maintained for development, strategic economic development.
Point, and I think if we could write our own ticket, that's what I would root for. But like you said, I don't know, we can decline this and go say, hey, can we still have the money? I mean,
There'll be a budget work session with city council. Come forward and put that proposal on the table. Coming up pretty quick. I think it may be within the next council meeting, might be that session. I don't remember. But the budget has to be adopted by the middle of May, so they will be having a budget work session here promptly.
From where I sit, we're kind of at just the groundbreaking with the RIFA coming on board, and while there's kind of some promise brewing in the wings associated with what that could become, I don't think that there's any proof yet on how in reality that's going to work. I think HREDA, we're definitely a fringe community with greater interest, considering that our neighbors to the north and west have all kind of removed themselves from HREDA, but I think as such, and our connectivity to Hampton, and has been that way for years, I think that it's kind of hard to separate ourselves from Hampton and Newport News and just the interconnection of the communities. And my gut says that it's probably the right thing to stay with HREDA for another year, again, considering we're kind of at the initiation of this RIFA, not understanding what that could become. And certainly I see that if that $12,000 was available to potentially put towards a RIFA development 12 months from now, I think that would be a lot easier discussion to understand where that investment is going if there was a project that was worth considering. Not having that on the table and the RIFA only being in its infancy, I think that's yet to develop to understand that dollar may be better invested. I think also with legacy and some of the other things that are in the fringes, I think that potentially a transition period over the last 12 months. It's certainly been that way with the change of the commercial section in town and Farm Fresh and a lot of that. So I think where I currently sit, I would kind of support maybe staying in it for.
I can support that also, because we take it out of the budget. And that's really one of the key things that we.
perfect world, I'd love to see this budgeted to us with more discretion on our end. In other words, it's not just for HRDA, that's the best bet, or if we think the RIFA or put it in war chest for some infrastructure. That would be ideal. I don't know if we can do that with council.
The request that's been asked to date is primarily focused on the funding for the HREDA piece. Certainly, and I think we're probably beyond that for this year's cycle, but for next year's cycle, we certainly could make an ask that would include potentially HREDA plus a reserve fund, borrowing Tim's term that he used.
We can modify it in the future to where it's not just stamped for HRD, and I think that's us being good stewards to say we're not just plowing this money into something blindly. We're going to use best, call for what's in that money, and it might be them, it might be somewhere else, but to me, it makes all the sense in the world to sort of piggyback that to our funding.
And as you may recall, prior to 12 months ago, we weren't even engaging in a dialogue related to HREDA that was handled at council level, and it never even came across our table, so to say. So the opportunity that it's before us to kind of discuss its merit has value, and
Yeah,
I think
and I think, to your point, Alan, this is designated as an HREDA revenue bundle, but I don't think that if you chose not to pursue HREDA, that City Council would pull that money back from your utilization. I cannot speak for council. Council will consider and deliberate and adopt a budget that they see as best for the community, but I don't think if you were to say, nope, we're not doing that, I don't think that money immediately goes away. I stand to be corrected by the finance director or by counselor or, of course, the city manager, but I think the city council is looking for your recommendation as far as participation with HREDA. I think it was their thinking that since the Economic Development Authority is about the business of economic development, and HREDA is a regional economic development authority, that I think they felt like, look, that needs to be over there for consideration now, but I don't know that the bundle goes away if you didn't choose to continue to participate. Other things have happened as far as regional participation opportunities, not least of which I'm sure everybody's familiar with Newport News, Williamsburg International Airport. One of the groups that we used to fund and be a member of was the Regional Air Service Enhancement Committee, and that is defunct, no longer in existence, and the approximately $5,000 that we used to provide annually for that, we no longer are doing that. And as the chairman referenced, we were hoping the RIFA would be further along now. It took a little bit longer, actually substantially longer, to get it all together, all of the ins and outs and processes for all the communities to participate. But we're not quite there yet. We're not functional. The RIFA is not ready to start this very minute. I think they don't have a revenue sharing plan. We have to move further along on the unmanned systems opportunity to figure out what it looks like, whether its cost benefit is compelling for all the localities to participate. In the absence of that, I think, is HRDA, not by default the way to go, but it's certainly a regional organization of economic development we could participate in, and I think that's probably where we're looking at now. But I do think council wants the EDA to have some funding to make these types of decisions, and if it's not this, I don't know that it would go away.
A big thing. Whatever we do in the future, I think it's imperative that we make our best judgment, send it to the right place. Don't just get stuck in this 20-year box that we're not thinking of the results. So that's my only.
Very good point.
I guess from my perspective, I could support, a trial year, and I guess I'm gathering ultimately the power of the purse. I mean, it's the city council's decision ultimately whether we participate or not.
Sure.
I think a conditional recommendation, yes, when if the reservations we've discussed here, that, as sort of conditions, evaluate more carefully this cost-benefit analysis, direct benefit of the data, and technical support and marketing support really come back to us in a meaningful way, and are there other opportunities that we could, better ways we could use those same resources, as long as our support for doing it is qualified by those additional considerations.
Motion.
It's already in your budget.
It is.
It's already in the budget request, so
It is.
you don't have to motion to keep it in the request, at least the way I read it, so, but it would take a motion to convey your reservations to the city manager about what you want to do.
I was under the impression that we needed the EDA.
the expenditure
funds to
of the
go to
funds.
HODA.
I'm not arguing with you, you certainly ought to do that, but I looked at the budget, and your request is already in the budget, there's the budget right there. It was handed out last night, so
So by approving the budget, you're also HODA
you're already
funds.
you're proving what the city manager has submitted and recommended, according, I'm assuming, the city manager's budget, so. A motion to support the budget would be in order.
I think we could do it now, but, you know. Qualifications that it be sort of on a trial basis for. During that year, we'd like to evaluate the staff's input, the cost-benefit analysis, and other options for, better utilization of those.
Did somebody say that the amount was 12.5 though in the budget?
That's because that's what's been allocated in the past. Supposedly, it's supposed to be based on your, $1 per citizen. And that was the old census number, and I think it's what they're still using.
So I think I heard a motion and I heard a second.
It's not going to make a difference. I think so.
I made a motion to kind of recommend reservations that have been identified. Alan's seconded that. Any additional comments or? Call a roll for that, please. Vote.
Hello. Director Trent.
Aye.
Aye. Item B under unfinished business was only if there was kind of held as a reserve in case we needed to amend the budget request, which don't believe that there is an amendment to that that's currently identified. Third item there is an EDA Big Woods property update. Like to
Yes, Mr. Chairman, please too. As the authority is aware, we had engaged the services of Integrity Environmental, Sandy Brenson, to look not only at the 6-parcel assemblage that you own across the street, which of course is due for their wetlands hopeful reconfirmation July 22nd of this year. Sandy, of course, is outstanding and is already working in process to prepare for that submission. But the authority, through discussions, determined that it would also be prudent to look at all of your properties in Big Woods that are currently developable, if you will. You've got some landlocked parcels back here that aren't currently in play, but based on that, we got a price from Sandy to take a look at all of the properties, make recommendations for those as to what would need to be done, continued good practices, if you will, to make sure they maintain their upland status. As such, on March the 13th, I had asked Mark Poquoson with the Public Works Department and Karen Holloway, our environmental officer, to accompany Sandy and I for a walking tour of all the properties, and I appreciate their time and efforts in doing so. And we had a discussion across the street about some of the swales. I think some of the vegetation just needs to be cleared a bit to make sure that the check dams continue to function properly. But other than that, Sandy felt like the properties look very good. The Lockowitz piece is not due for reconfirmation until 2021. The Gladys Watkins piece, which is right beside the traffic circle, the acre that you own adjacent to the old Sevilla building, she relooked at that and felt like that was in good shape right now as well. But she'll continue in this process. She'll make a final recommendation for the property across the street and make sure that she engages the Corps through the appropriate processes that need to happen to get that reconfirmed, but also give you a final report on these other properties, the Lockowitz and the Gladys Watkins piece. And I think it was very prudent on the authority's part to want to do that and to make sure that, that you manage those uplands well all along so that we don't get down to 90 days before needing a reconfirmation and all of a sudden, well, maybe we should have taken a look at this before, but you're showing great forethought, and I think this will pay dividends in the long run.
Any questions of Dave or at this time? So with that, that brings us to staff activities. Charity, are you going to report out on ribbon cuttings and upcoming?
It may have been mentioned previously. Building has several new businesses occupied at this time, so we suggested to them to building-wide ribbon cutting to call attention to the building. People aren't even aware. I mean, some of those businesses have people show up and say, oh, I never knew you were here, which is surprising. So holding an event on the 18th, cutting for all of those new businesses. There's a store there, there's a Tattoo Inc., 757 Inc. is upstairs. With Poquoson residents, but had not opened her office in Poquoson. So, and there's the been paying rent and hasn't moved in. That front building. But anyway, they're holding a ribbon cutting on the 18th, and Edward Jones opened another office in Poquoson. So we have also moving in, holding an annual spring shop local event. Just encouraging Saturday of May 4th to go out, eat out, go shopping in Poquoson, spend money in your participate, and just money spent local is way more impact that it makes on the community than money spent outside the community. So we're also having Mark Wilson. I thought I'd mention that too. He's a retail guru that we've had in those city in the past and acted the businesses, and he's coming Thursday to do an reminding everyone to please come out for that, because letting the businesses know how to improve. Friday, there's the home-based business conference. County had done a couple things locally, and now the whole region, again, regionalism is taking root, and the whole community region is participating. So this Friday, it's all day. There's going to have speakers. All the businesses, small businesses starting up are invited. The city will have a booth there so that we can tell anybody who's interested in having business in the city do and what the positives are of having a business. It's going to be a great event to really encourage small businesses and assist them and offer, different funding and a lot of different resources to help small businesses grow.
No, I think that was excellent, Chair. I guess the only thing I would add, if I was going to add anything, would be we have redoubled our efforts to engage our home-based businesses in the city to find out who they are, to encourage them to contact us so that we can connect them with services available locally, regionally, statewide, and sometimes from the federal government as well. One of the things we thought we would do to prime the pump, if you will, to get some interest in the home-based business conference, we offered a promotion that the first 10 Poquoson-based, home-based businesses that would choose to participate in the conference, the Economic Development Office would underwrite the cost of their registration and participation at the event. It's only like $25 to register, I think. So I'm pleased to report that we have 10 businesses that have taken us up on the offer. And we're hopeful, we're excited about that and hopeful that we can leverage their participation to help spread the word with other HBBs in the city. We can help grow that list and continue to support them even more effectively than when we've been able to thus far. So that was a good thing for us.
In fact, they are spreading that in addition to the home-based business conference. They do monthly lunch and learns, what they call it. They come out for lunch, you bring your lunch and you sit and you have a speaker that's relevant to your home-based business. So Poquoson's kicking that off. We're hosting the first one on May 8th. Each community will host one in their community, and it'll be broadcast to the mailing list that'll be derived from these events, so.
Where's the lunch and learn?
I believe we're going to hold it right here.
We think we will, and if that changes, we'll let you know. But I think, do you want to tell the first speaker is going to be?
Yes, Sandra Gardner is a resident, and she started Bazaar. She also has a couple other home-based businesses. Starting a business, so she's going to be also a speaker at the home-based business conference.
Our speakers from Poquoson.
Next month, I personally have a conflict on the 7th. I'll be in Washington, D.C. for a meeting starting that Sunday. Wanted to ask if the 14th would be acceptable for next, add it to the second Tuesday.
Works for me, because I'll be in Disney on that.
Yay! Conflicts to that date. We certainly could look or something, but you've got a lunch obviously here. All right, so then we'll plan for the 14th next month, and appreciate you guys' flexibility on that. Any closing comments before we?
Thought I had on the, just followed on the Big Woods Up, and that centered around wetlands delineation, but the legacy project was really born out of the effort that the city manager and city council and EPA
Sure.
together to sort of bring the landowners together. I mean, you know, just for us to do the internal work and then get the owners together, have several meetings, but, you know, that ultimately, you know, resulted in, hopefully, we'll see come out of the ground the legacy project, which is exclusively on the south side of Victory Boulevard. My recollection is, and it's just vague, that the north side had a similar situation in terms of fractured ownership, you know, legacy properties, but and potentially more wetland issues, but I don't know founding them, the ones, the legacy project on the south side. But I just didn't know at what point it made sense, if at all, to dust off that north side effort and you know, try and do it again. See the legacy coming out of the ground, but I feel like, you know, it worked, at least I think it
Very
did.
well.
And
Right.
so maybe it'd be nice to see. That might help our piece, you know, in terms of.
Oakland Development has reared its diligence contract for a Richmond group to buy that development. Abbott Realty had submitted a plan for like 40 or 50 lots behind the has been picked up for due diligence. Want to some activity on the north side. That property would be north and east of the nursing home. If you go down the driveway to the nursing home, if you go past the nursing home, it would be back in that area, then back towards Emmaus Church, comes out on the development right there, close to the drive is probably the road that goes through. So they had an approved plan which didn't get off the ground. Come in and have an option on the property, but they would do a different type of development.
No frontage on Victory, that it would all be,
No frontage on Victory, it'd be all inland. It does have significant wetlands, and they're dealing with the wetlands.
Yeah, that
Church piece is probably the biggest piece on that side of, which it doesn't have, appears to be no wetlands on that, appears to be. Back further, Rick West owns a piece, he and family there. Could be developed. I think it's just, they had some preliminary look, but they've never done anything with it.
I think your comment's very timely, and I think I think we're probably 3 to 6 months away from probably a strategic initiative to do something like that, maybe in the fall. I think that there'll be some more clarity with kind of the final, at least phase one of the legacy taking shape. Now they're kind of over some of the hurdles that they had to fight over the last few years. And so I think that maybe re-engaging that audience in the fall maybe makes sense.
Legacy would not have happened without Tim and the city manager, what they did to make that.
Absolutely.
Certainly is
right.
a concept that works.
Yep. And I think that there's some lessons that can be learned from what they've done with the wetlands and some other things from Legacy that I think re-engaging that dialogue certainly could bear some fruit. Also, I think having a better understanding of entrance, Victory Boulevard, traffic and some of that type stuff, I think certainly would weigh into a dialogue as well. And I believe you got probably some engaged owners in a few of those parcels that would warrant that would want that. So, my encouragement, I guess, would be let's maybe think about picking that up in the fall and seeing if we can harness enough interest to do that again.
Might be a good timing because the church, which owns that piece there, probably has inherited enough money that they may have some interest in a $billions of inheritance, so they've
Nice.
got.
Nice.
I'd just like to say that I've always felt that having that whole frontage considered as one parcel, or at least master planned, is so preferable to just piecemealing out these different parcels for the entrances to both the legacy and the other side. And we also have the landowner, Brad Drum, back there. He would like an entrance, and he look at the master plan, if you will, what's left.
Brewery? Still trudging along, nothing.
just didn't know if it just, and I just was unaware.
I don't think there's any concrete plans solidified at this point, but I think there's still some interest in making something happen in the city. All right, so with that, we can adjourn.
Thank you, folks.
Was she on?
I have no idea.
Was it Dale last week?
Now, I will tell you what's funny is my girlfriend already messaged me this morning. She saw it. I'm famous for being in the middle of a picture and being like, ah! Like, always. And she was like, it looks just like her
That
grandma.
you will let everybody know, but didn't see the game.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a Gigi expression.
I'm shocked that I don't see you in the UVA
So that's your.
And put on all of her blue and orange just once. She had blue pants, orange shirt, blue and orange sweater.
Absolutely.
Can't even.
I did wear my orange and blue tie yesterday for you guys.
See? So, statewide commitment. It's nice.
I did try to stay awake to watch the whole game. My husband said this morning, so did you stay awake? Who are you talking to?
Yeah, there was no way.
I stayed awake for the whole game.
Certainly.
I had a friend in Iowa who called me 3 times. You first called at halftime. They're all, well, looking okay, but then about 2 minutes left, he called, they blew a 10-point lead. By the way, I greatly appreciate it.
Always my pleasure, sir. Good to see you as well. You too.
It's taken them a while to get their act together, what to do. They were looking for a buyer so that they could, so they got that work there. And then, folks from Florida, Dixon, he did call me. I'm working on that. I love those guys. They were very, good to deal with. They're good to deal with. They got a zillion questions, and I've sent them all emails. They don't understand the process. In the choice between lower court and upper court, because, they're limited, but they wanted speed, so they chose the lower court process.
Yeah, they are, I've worked with them extensively.
All right, then we do this. I'll start doing the chairs.
Well, I appreciate it. I promise you, I honor referrals, I won't be trying to see that they all come back safe. But I do appreciate both of them, they're very nice. And I had nothing interesting, it was about a 30-day period there, where only those 2 things came from you and spoke. They had this trust case, they had a 3-day trial.
Thank you for being here today, bro. I appreciate this,
So, and the lady, the elderly lady, she had the microphones closer to the speaker. Intentionally done anything, but the kids were all mad, the mom was spending all the money. You were fine. And so,
Really?
You were
I'm trying to lean in and talk.
Judge Conway said,
I tried. Chet doesn't get
you need competent legal advice. I suggest you call Wayne Moore. When the judge tells somebody on the bench to fight, you can't get much better right now. I started to call Judge Conway and say, how much do I owe you? So I took 3 nights of referrals in the last 30 days or so.
Thank you.
I do appreciate all your help.
He's in his office.
All right, good. You got the paper, you got a good brief. Make sure I got everything on.
Oh, sure you did.
I did manage to he threw out later this week or in the next week. I did